Good morning, everyone. I believe we are live. If you can't hear us on the other end, there is a chat button on the platform, and you can just indicate to us whether you cannot hear us or see us. You're all in a fortunate position because we can't see you, and we've got to look at a little camera. So it is going to take some getting used to. My prior Zoom interactions have certainly been on the basis of being able to see people, so I'm staring at a little camera this morning. By way of introduction, I'm James. I've been involved in Huge Group for the last 12 years, since Huge Group's listing. To those people who are not familiar with the company, Andy Openshaw on my left, possibly on your right, depending on how you're seeing the screen, joined me last year in the position of Chief Operating Officer of Huge Group. Andy is ex-Roynet, and he managed their telecommunications cluster, and he brought into Roynet about 5-6 years ago a business by the name of ECN, which is one of the leading voice over IP operators in South Africa. Was then and is today, and Andy joining me was a very important accomplishment, and I'll get into that later. Samantha Sequeira, again, either on my left or depending on your right, joins us from Virgin Mobile. I had the pleasure of interacting with her on a supplier-customer basis about 3 years ago, and I was particularly impressed with her skill set and asked her to join Huge Group as well. What we'd like to do today is have an informal conversation, albeit that it is one way rather than bilateral. Andy, Sam, and my preferences typically when talking about Huge Group is to sit around a lunch table or a breakfast table and have a conversation and tell people about ourselves and tell people about the company. And that's really what we'd like to try and achieve in this morning's webinar, rather than putting up a 30-page PowerPoint presentation and take you line through line through that presentation. So we've got a couple of pointers. We're going to put up a little agenda so everybody knows how long things are going to take, or the duration of this conversation, and where we are at a particular stage in the conversation. So if we just go back one, and just to go to the agenda point. So what we'd like to cover with you today is just take you through the 2020 financial year. We don't feel it's absolutely necessary to take you through the financial numbers. You have been in possession of those. Obviously, if there is a question, we welcome you to present that to us or table it to us through the platform, and we will answer those questions, but we won't go in detail through the financial numbers. And so point one on the agenda is really to give you some of the information around those results, which we believe are important and which are not necessarily reflected in those financial statements. Whatever we do and say today will not contain any forward-looking statements for obvious reasons, so we'll be particularly careful about what we say to you in that regard. So we'll go through the 2020 financial year accomplishments. What we'd like to do is give you a little bit of an idea of the degree to which Huge Group's operating companies have been resilient during COVID-19, and we're particularly pleased with this resilience, but what we'll try to do is give you an idea of why these businesses have been resilient. We'll then take you through our view of the growth opportunities for the company or for the group, and then the prospects of raising capital in this market. I mean, we've all got our views on the ability to raise money, and we'll just unpack that a little bit more. In the fifth point, we'll just look at the likelihood of an issue of shares for cash or a rights offer. I mean, that's a question that everybody is asking of companies who are listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and whether they're going to have rights offers at the wrong price. So let's answer that question for you. then we will just take you through our view on dividends and the communication we gave to our shareholders in our provisional results that were published recently, and just unpack our views a little bit more so that there's no confusion as to where we sit on dividends. And then we would like to take you through the investment case, and hopefully items 1 to 6 inform a lot of the investment case, and we can just summarize what we believe to be the investment case for you. And then we'll end with questions and answers, if certainly questions if you have any, and answers if you have questions. So if we just if we unpack 2020 for a moment, I think the most important thing to do in any business is have a look at the people and what kind of capacity a company has to be able to deliver. And so 2020 was very much a task, or a year in which we tried to build the capacity that we needed and desperately need to be able to build a much bigger business going forward. And I suppose in looking at 2020, a reflection on the past is important. So if one goes back to 2016, Huge Group was really a single entity listed opportunity. So there was a single operating company, and it was ultimately wrapped through a listing wrapping of Huge Group. And in 2017, that changed. And today, we no longer have a single operating company, but we have 5 operating companies. And so 2017 was a year in which we tried to bed down a very big acquisition relative to the size that we were at the time. And 2018 was the start of trying to build the capacity to build a bigger group, and build a bigger group both organically and acquisitively. So that was 2018 and probably a large part of 2019. And the decisions we made early on in 2019, taking into account where we sat in 2017 and 2018, those decisions were important in terms of building the capacity. So we have put up on the presentation just a very cursory discussion on the past CFO and Zunaid Babulia and his involvement in the business, and just an attempt by us to give some kind of context to that. So what we'd like to say as an opening remark is that this group did very, very well by Zunaid Babulia, and the relationship brought a significant level of credibility to this business. And it did so because it was able to attract an individual of Zunaid's character and credibility and experience in the marketplace. But it is important to understand the context in which we engaged with Zunaid in him joining us. Zunaid is a gentleman that spent 23 years at MTN, and in his last position was responsible for managing 23 MTN Group companies. And that was a significant role, and typically a role that took 12 to 15 hours of his day. And so Zunaid had put in 23 years of really hard graft. And when I engaged with Zunaid in 2016, there was a very clear understanding of what kind of capacity he could bring to the table. And what we agreed to do at that point in time is see how things unfolded and whether the relationship that we were envisaging would be sustainable. What we realized in 2018 was that the kind of hours that we needed in a growing group were significantly more than what Zunaid and I could deliver. And so we needed to build the capacity in a different way. And hence the decision in late 2018, early 2019, to invite Andy Openshaw and Samantha Sequeira to join us. And that is to build the capacity with people who have the ability to put the 12, 14 hours on the table for us. So a lot of 2020 was about getting Andy and Sam up to speed as to where we sit, what our mission and vision is, where we would like to take the company going forward. At a personal Andy James level, I effectively got onto one knee and asked Andy to marry me. And what Andy has committed to is a 10-year, at least a 10-year journey with me in terms of trying to build this business. And obviously, we do understand that our journey is very much dependent on you as shareholders and supporting us in that journey and mandating us to ultimately deliver returns for you. And we obviously understand that if we don't deliver those returns, then you're going to find custodians who will deliver those returns for you. The achievements that Andy, Sam, and I have been able to get through in the 2020 financial year have been significant. From a finance perspective, Sam has put into place significant reporting structures, and those will become easier and easier as we move through the year. So it was important to set up a group reporting function, which we didn't have before for the reasons that I've just explained, because we were a single entity group. And then from an operational perspective, it is very important if one is growing a group that one has one's finger on the pulse and one is engaging every single day with your operating companies and your MDs. And so an operating officer role is very important in terms of that engagement. And that's where Andy brings a wealth of experience to the table in terms of engagement. And the engagement in the 2020 year has been absolutely phenomenal, and we have seen the fruits of that engagement. Whereas if one looks at the 16, 17, and 18 years, the ability to engage was constrained just because there are so many hours in a day, and it's a limited input. So we've seen a lot of fruit. We've been able to clear a lot of things that we wanted to clear. We built a little bit more capacity in terms of group reporting, so costs have come onto the table, and we are going to have to justify those costs going forward, and we understand that as well. So there is pressure on us. We're not naive about the pressure that we face, but we will deal with what we have in a measured kind of way. We'll build in a measured kind of way. We're not looking to create this massive head office infrastructure, but we do need the capacity to be able to deliver to you what you require from us. So we brought a group accountant on board and 2 professional assistants to bring some additional capacity. If we look at last year, with typically 2 new senior people or executives as part of the team, and if we have a look at last year relative to the accomplishments, you'll see that not only did we get through an education and a training and an enlightenment exercise, but we also knocked off a number of important tasks. The first to talk about is our empowerment transaction with Huge Connect. And again, to give you a little bit of a flavor of the kind of hours behind that, the work was significant to be able to put a transaction together that ultimately, at the end of the day, came with as small a dilutory impact as possible. And when one unpacks the Huge Connect empowerment transaction properly, one will understand the value that was brought to the table in that transaction. So the earnings per share dilution for that empowerment transaction came in at 0. There was a significant enhancement in terms of the way we structured that in terms of profitability going forward. That is all public information, and if one goes through that circular, one can see to what extent we have not only achieved empowerment for that subsidiary company, but we've also achieved it at the lowest possible cost to the group and to yourselves as shareholders and to anyone who is a prospective shareholder in this company. Just to unpack that a little bit more, so what we did do is with our empowerment partner, there was a recognition of past contributions and historical positions, and so we created a preference share structure in which we stripped out the historical, what we believe to be a fair historical value for past performance, which was valued in the order of about 450 million rand. And we stripped that out via an ordinary dividend and a subscription then for a preference share instrument in the underlying subsidiary company. And after the payment of that dividend and the subscription, the empowerment partner then subscribed for 16.89% of the ordinary shares in the company. So going forward, we will share in that ratio with our empowerment partner. That empowerment partner is close to us, he's well known to us, has been involved in this group since 1994, and is a trusted partner of ours. And you know, we obviously are of the view that he shares the same kind of view about us. So that was a very important transaction, took a significant amount of hours, had new team members as part of the process, and we got that done. What we will do is we will replicate that model going forward at a subsidiary company level. So from a huge group perspective, we've decided not to deal with empowerment at the listed company level, where things move around, particularly on the ownership score because of changes in ownership. And we will rather deal with empowerment on a per subsidiary company basis so that we achieve empowerment, we lock empowerment in at the subsidiary company level. And in that regard, we did another empowerment transaction last year, which might not have been seen as an empowerment transaction, but certainly had the motive of trying to enhance empowerment for another subsidiary company of ours. So Huge Networks was a business that was wholly owned by us, that was acquired by us in 2017. And what we did last year, was to do an unlisted paper swap or share for share swap with the vendors of Hotel Communications and ourselves, where we ultimately swapped our own unlisted paper, again without coming at a listed paper cost in terms of dilution from an additional issue of huge group shares. What we achieved out of that transaction, which might not be known to a lot of people, is that we achieved empowerment through that transaction, with our partners in Huge Networks having the empowerment credentials that we needed. So we brought empowerment to the table, we enlarged that business, we scaled it, we took it from a 35-40 million rand turnover business to a 90 million rand turnover business. And that particular business, and we'll unpack it for you in the slides that follow, that is a business that we can scale, and we see significant growth from scaling in that particular area. Then we did a little transaction last year involving a company by the name of PanSmart. Our little short name convention is HPAN for it. It's a little PADX company that has the license to distribute Panasonic PADXs in South Africa. And that acquisition was made where we acquired 50% plus one share of that company for 100 rand, and then agreed to buy out half of the shareholder loans, which was sitting at 26 million rand. What we achieved through the structure was that we have first rights of repayment on our loan, and our partner's loans by agreement with our partner have been back ranked. So that transaction came at a very small opening cost to us, but its potential is enormous, and we'll unpack that again in the slides that follow. The potential on that business is enormous, where we can self-fulfill our own prophecy on that business. We did have some historical disputes, and unfortunately in the telecommunications industry, where you do have Goliaths, disputes and certainly billing disputes are the order of the day, where you're dealing with millions and millions of transactions, and sometimes one can resolve them quickly, other times one can't. And so we had some older disputes that we'd been carrying for a number of years, one in particular with Telemasters Holdings Limited, which was a billing dispute, and again with Virgin Mobile South Africa, again a billing dispute, and we were able to close out those disputes last year. And again, you know, dealing with disputes and closing out disputes takes time. but we were able to close that out during the course of last year. We're also very cognizant, and this is to the last point, we're also very cognizant of where Huge Group sits as a small cap listed company and the vagaries of a listed market, and particularly the small cap end of the listed market, where supply-demand imbalances can have significant impact, or can have a significant impact on share prices. And so what was important last year was to have a discussion with our partners in Huge Connect, who had become our partners in 2017, where we acquired ConnectNet Broadband Wireless, and have a discussion with them as to the profit warranty that we had in place and the ongoing need for that profit warranty, and then their own views on their future participation in Huge Group. And those conversations were very encouraging conversations for Andy, Sam and I last year, because the ConnectNet vendors put a very strong view on the table that they see the journey in Huge in the same way that we see the journey in Huge, and that is there's a minimum 10-year journey. And for that reason, they were prepared to provide us with a lock-in undertaking on their pool of shares, which is in the order of about 18% of the share capital of Huge Group. And while they have no intention of selling their shares, it was a commitment to the long-term strategy of growing this group with us. And our view is that the market didn't take a proper read on that, but it is that significant that it's worth a mention again to yourselves. And that is people with 18 million Huge Group shares valued in the order, in terms of the consideration price of those shares, 6 times that. Those shares were taken at a price of 6 Rand. And that's a commitment to Huge Group, and it's a belief in what we as a group of people can deliver. And it's an important testimony to what is capable of being achieved in Huge Group, and what opportunity lies within Huge Group. So that was a 2-year lock-in. It expires in July next year. So what we're saying is we don't really need it. It's more about what it demonstrates to you and what it demonstrates to us that is of significance, rather than the actual lock-in. If we go to the next slide.
Do you want to address the MTN agreement?
Oh, sorry, Andy's reminded me, I haven't addressed the MTN agreement. As older shareholders in the business will be aware, Huge Telecom is the acquirer of services from the mobile network operators, and it is important in that space to have more than one supplier. We have had a long-standing relationship with Cell C and Telecom Business Mobile in the provision of mobile telecommunication services to the group. And what is important is to go up the ladder of supplier credibility and supplier number. And so last year, it was very important for us to broaden the number of suppliers we have to Huge Telecom, and the work involved, again, to secure an agreement with MTN was significant. It took us 9 months to bed down an agreement with them, and MTN, I can tell you, are very much seeing us as an MVNO opportunity. We sit in a particular area of MVNO, in the sense that we're a niche MVNO operator. We don't operate in their core traditional space of consumer product delivery. We sit in a space that doesn't compete with their traditional business. So we are a very good partner to MTN in terms of its own MVNO aspirations. But again, those kind of transactions take a long time to bed down, but very important transactions, and so worth putting up there and informing you about it. Just in terms of some of the financial numbers, I'm going to ask Sam just to very briefly run through them with you, just so that you are reminded of them, and then just to draw out some peculiarities in the results on a comparative basis, because the 2019-2020 results, just on the face of it, are not comparative.
And can you go to the next slide, if you don't mind? Sorry, I think let me start at high level. Like James had said, the disparity between 2019 and 2020. Ultimately, what we've tried to do is include a normalized P&L view for the stakeholders and investors to see what the true performance of the underlying subsidiaries is. And ultimately, the reason we have done that is in 2020, 2019, there was a trust donation income that was in the P&L. So for normalized performance, all we did was reverse that out so we could try and see the movement between actual performance of 2019 to performance of 2020. We haven't removed any normalized performance items out of 2020 as it's true figures. Nothing funny happened in 2020. So that was the one point. The other point we've raised, or has been raised, is the emphasis of matter relating to this trust donation income, which is the Connect Net Incentive Trust. In 2019, you'll see the director's report had a substantial amount of information relating to the trust donation income and the consolidation of the Connect Net Incentive Trust. It ultimately arose from this. So in the prior year, we had a qualification of the financial statements, which is reduced to an emphasis of matter. So it's an unqualified opinion. It's just ultimately raising the points of an emphasis of matter because of the opening retained earnings from the Connect Net Incentive Trust donation income. That being said, in the prior year was 14 million rand, which we removed. It has now reduced to 7.6 million rand on the opening retained earnings, and further reduces and clears out in the next financial year when the trust pays and distributes all the donations, and the trust is ultimately closed. So we don't foresee any further issues relating to the trust going forward. In the 2020 financial year, we had the IFRS 16 adoption. That's one of the policies that changed, or one of the new additions. Ultimately, what results from that is operating expenses, included operating leases. Those operating leases are no longer seen in operating expenses. They have a right of use asset and a corresponding lease liability in the balance sheet, so brought on balance sheet, and are depreciated or amortized, as well as finance costs raised on the lease liability. So they shift from OPEX to finance costs to OPEX, finance costs, and depreciation. Okay, so ultimately we can speak more about the queries that we received as well on the increase in OPEX. That relates mainly to the acquisitions of OTAL and PanSmart during the current financial year. And obviously, like James had said, it's growing the corporate office structure and building the capacity in order to leverage off in the future. So that was the increase. Not sure if the next slide, and what moves on the next slide is ultimately, okay, no, go back. Okay, yeah, let me run through the high level numbers. So revenue is up by 14%. So we went from 433 million to 492 million. Our gross profit margin increased by 15%, which is great, from 55 to 63%, ultimately by reducing costs and creating efficiencies there. The EBITDA increased by 20% from 149 million to 178 million. And you can see that the operating profit increased 11% from 122 million to 135 million. If we take a normalized view, you can see the operating profits increased by 26% from 107 to 135 million, obviously taking out the trust donation income in the prior year. Group OPEX increased by 25%. It's mainly due, as I said, to the business combinations of OTAL and PanSmart, the Telemaster settlement, the VMSA settlement, and legal and consulting fees relating to all the BE transactions. One of the other large expenses you'll see that we moved into a separate line item in the current financial year is movement in credit loss allowances. Ultimately, IFRS 9 was adopted in the previous financial year, and as a result, they're no longer called provision for doubtful debts, they're now called movement in credit loss allowances. This large 17 million rand movement in credit loss allowance this current financial year relates to an elaborate fraud that maybe Andy and James can elaborate on later in Huge Connect. Ultimately, we raised debtors to the value of 17 million and fully provided for them in a movement of credit loss allowances of 17 million in this year. I'm not sure if you want to elaborate now or should we take it after?
I think you carry on, and then we'll just unpack that as after you.
Perfect. Okay, so just high levels, the fintech grouping, we increased marginally modestly at 5%. The GPs went up from 63 to 66%. And ultimately in the fintech grouping, this movement in credit loss allowance is in Huge Connect, which falls under fintech grouping. Then we've got our telecom grouping, which increased revenue by 19%, and GP up to 67%. The corporate office grouping includes a lot of the group consulting, professional fees, listing statutory fees, legal fees. So we still have a high number or a high amount of costs that are sitting in the group corporate office structure that ultimately supports the subsidiary companies at a group level. So the aim of obviously the corporate office grouping is to fund corporate actions going forward. So the net debt position of the company is 133 million. We've got access to 20 million rand worth of available funds in the future growth facility, and we have 40 million cash on our balance sheet. So we're in a nice cash position. Our EBITDA margin is 36%, which is increased from 32%. And I think those are the high level ratios and analysis from my side. I'm not sure if we need any further information or elaboration.
No, that's what we'll do is we'll unpack the first bullet under item 3 for you, and just give you a little bit more information about how that fraud took place. It is a fraud that was designed over a number of years, so it didn't happen in a very short space of time. It was well planned, and yes, I mean, just at a brutally honest level, we got caught by what is a very elaborate fraud. And would you unpack exactly what happened there and how we ultimately got duped into a transaction?
Yeah, I can do that. Morning, everybody. I think just as an aside as well, we are running a Q&A deck. So just to remind you, if you do have any questions as we go through the presentation, if you load your questions into the deck now, when we come to the end, we'll be able to answer the questions in order of the presentation. At the moment, it's looking pretty lean on the question front. And it's possibly just because James and Sam have done such a great job so far in advance all the questions. But please put your questions up there so we do have something to talk about at the end. I think to discuss the fraud, it probably had its roots in what we were attempting in the beginning with cross-selling, where people didn't stick to their knitting. We had a very accomplished salesman in the Huge Connect operation who brought in very good and profitable business for Huge Connect over a long time. He brought a deal to the table in the voice and mobile space that was new to Connect, because Connect, as you know, is our fintech connectivity business. But the business he brought to the table, and based on his track record, looked very attractive. The margins were good, the opportunity was good. And he started through 2 businesses, one called Driven by Safety and one called The Group, ordering phones via Huge Connect, or we were selling the phones via Huge Connect that we were acquiring from Telecom for delivery to Uber vehicles, and they were using high-end mobile phones in these Uber vehicles. The first order was for a couple of phones. They went out. Feedback that came back from The Group and Driven by Safety was this was a good solution. They liked the model and they started paying their account. The second month, they ordered a few more phones, paid the account. Things started to look interesting. They were saying they were going to grow and expand their business. And as you do when you see a new opportunity coming along, you hope it is as good as you think it's going to be. And this thing started growing very, very swiftly. And the order quantities after 6 months started to climb from ordering 10 or 20 mobile phones, and they were all high-end phones, so you're talking a 20,000 rand Apple iPhone, the equivalent Android, to the point where it got to ordering a couple of 100 phones in a month. And then what happened is the first payment was skipped. The team at Connect made an approach, said what is happening is, listen, there's growth in our business, we're cash strong, but things are viable. We'll get the transfer across. A bank deposit slip came across saying, here's your payment so we can expand, can we order more? And he slowly reeled in the fish. When we sat down in March, April of last year, and payments had not happened for the second time, we had a look back at what had gone on over the last couple of months, and it was a very clear sign of what in the voice market we see fairly regularly. It's these guys coming to troll for someone who can move a lot of SIM cards or a lot of phones, but the underlying business is not what we thought it was. We immediately called a stop to the contract, but unfortunately at that stage we were 1,000 phones in, and we called in legal to go and chase the debt. Once we started investigating where the debt was, after a lot of untruths and blatant lies and transfer documents of 2 million rand into an account, fake bank deposit slips, fake meetings, fake illnesses. In fact, one of the directors of Driven by Safety, we were actually told had died and the reason had not been able to make the meeting. We realized the extent of the fraud. The fraud at that point had the cost that we've recognized in the movement of the credit losses. The good news on that 17 million, which is fully provided, is we did have an insurance policy which paid out last month 5 million rand of that. So we have a 5 million recovery this year on that 17. And we are in full legal and investigation process to recover and prosecute these people and the parties. We do know who they are. The cases have been lodged with the police. Affidavits have been signed and submitted. The channel that these phones moved through has been identified by our investigators. There was never a phone put in a car, just for clarity to your point of view. These high-end phones were sold into the grey market, and a lot of them have ended up in the insurance channel as replacement phones. So we have followed that path, and we believe there's substantial chance of recovery in this environment. But an elaborate fraud, because the business wasn't used to the market it was playing in. I think James and probably myself, who've been in mobile phone business for 12 or 15 years, might have caught it a bit earlier, but it was no bad light shone on the team at Connect. They looked at a very good business, and unless you've been stung before, you don't see this thing coming. But we've all learned a lesson now. I think when we sit back from an operating point of view, we are keeping our business focused on what they understand. We're not trying to become jacks of all trades. We'd rather be master of one, and I think that's showing the results in the underlying opco. So that hurt. It hurts us all, but we will recover, and we believe we will recover a lot of it. And it certainly, we hope, touch wood, that something like this is not going to come past us again. James, I think that covers it.
Yeah. I think just to add to that, obviously in our dividend deliberations, a matter such as a 17 million rand fraud does have a knock-on impact on one's views on cash resources and using those cash resources in terms of a distribution. So the key points, that I could summarize of what Andy has just told you is really the point around the cross-sell. We certainly in 2017 and 2018 believed that the way to leverage the assets that we were buying was through a cross-sell kind of exercise. And that is what Andy is talking about when he says that because of that initiative and allowing allowing all the companies in the group to be able to branch out and supply different products and services that they ordinarily wouldn't have done, but to an enlarged customer base, has its downside. And what we have done since then is we've redefined how we can leverage the 50,000 customers that we have, the real estate customers that we have, and it's not through a cross-selling exercise, but rather a leveraging exercise of giving different companies access to that real estate, rather than allowing a particular company to broaden its products and services. And that was a very important learning for us. The other reason around another reason that's related to the fraud in terms of being susceptible to the fraud was that in 2017 and 2018, Huge Connect was the subject of a profit warranty. And so the oversight from a group perspective was limited in a certain sense, because we had to allow the managers, vendors, to be able to fulfill or to drive a strategy to achieve their profit warranties. And so that those kind of factors complicated, and one learns from those exercises is that, you know, profit warranties do have their value, but they also have their downsides. Just to go back to, for a moment, just to elaborate on the qualification of 2019, and hence the emphasis of matter in 2020, and just to give a very practical tabling of exactly what happened there, because typically the market becomes very uncomfortable with things like qualifications and emphases of matter. But when you unpack this particular matter, you will see it's actually it has an immaterial impact, and it is of little significance. But one needs to understand exactly what happened behind that. And, you know, I'll just elaborate for a moment. When we acquired ConnectNet Broadband Wireless in 2017, the ConnectNet vendors, out of their own volition, decided to make a donation of 14 million rand, which they had received from Huge Group in the form of cash and shares. They decided to donate 14 million rand worth of consideration to a trust for the benefit of their staff. From Huge Group's perspective, it had nothing to do with Huge Group, and so for the 2018 financial statements, the trust and its assets, which consisted of cash and Huge Group shares, was ignored, because the group was of the view that it had nothing to do with us. After the 2018 audit, our auditors of the day, BDO, commissioned an audit into the trust, and after significant deliberation and lots of differences of opinion, an expert's opinion was commissioned, in which the expert provided us with an IFRS opinion that said ultimately at the end of the day that this trust, which had been funded to the tune of 14 million rand through donations that had not come from Huge Group, was an entity controlled by Huge Group in terms of IFRS 10, and ought to be consolidated as part of Huge Group. That opinion was received just prior to the interim results for 2019, and the board relied on that expert opinion. When the board of Huge Group appointed Moore Stevens in December 2019, or sorry, my apologies, started engaging with Moore Stevens in 2019, Moore Stevens were directed in particular to that opinion and were asked to consider that opinion and whether they would have a different view on that opinion. And Moore Stevens came back saying that they agreed with the opinion, that they'd run it through their own technical departments, and were comfortable with the opinion. Again, through the audit of the 2019 financial year, when we got into the full swing of the audit, again, as a board, we reminded Moore Stevens of that opinion and asked them all the way through the audit whether there were any circumstances that had changed to cast a different view on that opinion. And again, we got the response that the opinion was intact. The day before we released the 2019 provisional results, the expert, through an informal conversation with Moore Stevens, indicated to Moore Stevens that she felt her opinion of November 2019 was flawed in a particular respect, and she was going to revise her opinion. And this was done 2 days before the release of the financial statements. For that reason, the board made a decision that it would rely on the opinion first received, and that if the expert wanted to retract her opinion, that she ought to do so through the correct channels, and that because the company hadn't commissioned that opinion, the company was not going to get involved, and it was going to rely on the opinion that it got in the first instance. And so because of that, an automatic difference of opinion arose, and our current auditors, out of an abundance of caution, had to put out an emphasis of matter at that point in time, which then culminated in the qualification a month later when we put out final results. So that's the reason for the emphasis of matter on the provisional results. And then just to talk momentarily to why there was a qualification when the final results came out. Moore Stephens then went and sought its own opinion from another expert in IFRS, and that expert came out with another opinion, and that opinion was that the ConnectNet Incentive Trust, which held the 14 million rand in cash and Huge Group shares, ought not to be consolidated by Huge Group. That gave the board, or that presented the board with 3 opinions on the matter. Subsequent to that, and in our engagement, which has been a very friendly engagement with our regulator, the JSE, we are now sitting with 5 opinions relating to the ConnectNet Incentive Trust, and it certainly appears to the board of Huge Group, and we're not experts in IFRS, that this is a very complicated matter. And what we have chosen to do, which we think was the best thing to do, was we commissioned an expert. That expert gave us an opinion. We relied on that opinion, and we persisted with that opinion. And subsequent to that, we've now been presented with 4 different opinions on it. Just to talk to you just briefly on exactly what we're talking about here and why we believe the first opinion is the best opinion on which to report. At the end of the day, the ConnectNet vendors, out of kind-heartedness, donated 14 million rand of their own money to this trust. What we are required to do in terms of IFRS 2 as Huge Group is we are required, in terms of share-based payments, is we are required to expense that 14 million rand as a Huge Group expense over the period of vesting of those donations. And when I say vesting, the distribution of those donations to the underlying beneficiaries. So absent IFRS 10 for a moment, what you would have seen, absent IFRS 10, is you would have seen 14 million rands worth of artificial expenses hit Huge Group's income statement over a period of 4 years. When we received the opinion, the first opinion that said that the trust is an entity controlled by Huge and the donation income is income in the hands of Huge Group, it all made commercial sense to us in terms of its treatment, because ultimately you would have artificial income coming in of 14 million rand immediately, and then the amortization or distribution of that 14 million rand over 4 years and a complete matching of that, with the end result being over a 4-year period that there would be no impact on Huge Group's income statement. And when we deliberated on the matter and we deliberated on the fact that we had an expert's opinion, we stuck to that because there was commercial symmetry in that decision. And that really wraps up on the prior period, restatement issues, the emphasis of matter and the qualification issues. I think more importantly for Huge Group shareholders is the view that your debt funders take when they see a qualification. So if a qualification is negatively seen by shareholders, it's certainly even more negatively seen by debt providers. And what we can tell you is that Future Growth, who are our primary debt providers, are entirely comfortable that the entire debate is a rather academic one and must be left to the academics to decide which way it must pan out. It ultimately, over a 4-year period, has no effect whatsoever on Huge Group. But given the accounting, we've had to at least report to you and show you exactly what is going on in terms of a real operating position, and hence this year we chose to show normalized earnings. And if we could go to the next. what we think is very important for shareholders and prospective investors is to actually understand what our companies do. And I think we think COVID-19 has given us a great opportunity to provide evidence of the resilience of our businesses. And all of our businesses, bar PanSmart, and we'll unpack that for you, all of our businesses have been very, very resilient during COVID-19, and the impact has been largely harmless. And it goes to what these underlying businesses do. And what I'm going to do for you is I'm just going to try and briefly just unpack each of the businesses, what they do, what they bring to the market. And then I'm going to ask Andy to give you our experiences on each of those businesses during COVID-19 in testament to the resilience. Huge Telecom is a provider of corporate telephony solutions. It is a one-trick pony. Had we still been sitting today with Huge Telecom as our only asset, that would be a concern. If you're a telecom in a declining voice market, and we've seen evidence of that in terms of their fixed line business, a long-term strategy involving voice is not a particularly good strategy. In the case of Huge Telecom, it owns such a minute share of the market that if it took its 0.25% share of the corporate telephony market and quadrupled that to 1%, it would be a significant investment proposition. And so when one looks at voice, one's got to look, and a one-trick pony, one's got to look at that in context. If you were a telecom and you're betting simply on voice, that would be a bad decision. Where you have, in our particular case, Huge Telecom, and it plays in the corporate telephony space and is now part of a bigger group. It's no longer a one-trick pony in the group, and it has such a minute market share. The market share gain proposition is a significant one, which can deliver significant return for shareholders. So what does Huge Telecom do? Huge Telecom substitutes an old copper cable, and instead of putting in a data line, which has its own vagaries, and putting voice over that data line, it uses GSM. And what is certainly becoming very evident is the pros of GSM versus the cons of any other delivery mechanism. And when I'm talking about any other delivery mechanism, I'm talking about different media, whether that's fiber, whether that's microwave, whether that's LTE, and you're delivering voice across that mechanism. Data has its own challenges, and one of the most significant challenges surrounding data is security. The other significant challenge is stability. And with those two factors, GSM is an incredibly valuable proposition in terms of delivering a voice-only solution. In the consumer market, a voice-only solution and a data-only solution and a video-only solution won't work, because we don't want to run around or walk around with 3 devices. In a corporate environment, you can have separate infrastructure layers. So we can have long debates on the need to carry multiple media across a single infrastructure platform, but that's best reserved for another forum, because that would probably take us a few hours. But it is important to recognize those facts. So what do? We substitute corporate telephony and different infrastructure that gets used in the delivery of that with a very safe and reliable, stable, secure corporate telephony solution using GSM. And it is able to do the GSM solution that Huge Telecom has at its disposal. It is able to do exactly what Telecom's solution can do and what the voice over IP solution can do. To give you one or two nuggets in that business, in terms of the value proposition, 6-7 years ago, it was a minute-only business. Huge Telecom was a minute-only business that went and sold minutes to customers. of corporate telephony. Today, it is a line rental business. That business has over 43,000 telephone lines. It sells those telephone lines in excess of 200 Rand a month, and that forms a very big or large annuity revenue stream. So we go back 6-7 years ago, there was no fixed annuity. Today, when Huge Telecom starts the month, it has 10 million Rands worth of line rentals to start that month with, and that 10 million Rand in line rentals covers overhead, cost of sales, and a whole lot of things. All the minute margin that comes with that is just cream on top. And again, Andy will unpack the beauty of that business model for you during COVID-19. So that's Huge Telecom. It's a one-trick pony. We understand it. We want to keep it a one-trick pony. We don't want it to delve out into any other area. We want to keep it focused on what it does, and we want it to do it as best as it can. And we want to bring in automation and digitalization, and we want to bring cost efficiencies to that. We think it is a significant growth opportunity. 43,000 telephone lines when there's a market for 3 to 4 million telephone lines is a very, very small market share. And we certainly believe that with some stability in supplier relationships, we can grow that business substantially. So that's Huge Telecom. Huge Connect, at the end of the day, is a similar type of rental business. What it does is it rents a SIM card from the mobile suppliers. It adds a layer of security to a transaction environment. It puts that SIM card into a mobile point of sale that you and I would use when we pay for our restaurant bill at a restaurant, and it rents that SIM card out, and it rents it out to a number of customers. So in the case of Huge Telecom, we've got 20,000 corporate telephony customers. In the case of Huge Connect, we have 30,000 merchant customers who all have our SIM cards, where we rent from the mobile network operators. We add value to that in terms of a secure transactional layer, and we rent that out to 30,000 merchants, and on top of that, to all the major banks. And historically, Huge Connect has had First National Bank and Nedbank as its customers, and last year, the Huge Connect team were able to secure Standard Bank. We're starting to work with ABSA. We're having early engagements with Capitec, and there's significant opportunity in that space. So we rent a SIM card in, and we rent a SIM card out, and we take a margin for that. We take no transactional risk on that business. Huge Networks is a traditional data business, and that's a small business that we acquired. It was a 35 million Rand, 40 million Rand turnover business when we acquired it in 2017. So for the 2018 year, that's what it delivered. And we were able to scale that with our partners in Otel and grow that business. And it really is, it is about your base. The bigger your base, the bigger your absolute growth. And so we are trying to build that business, and we are doing so both organically by building a bigger base acquisitively. And we can do more of that, and we can grow that business in an acquisitive and organic and a complementary kind of fashion. And we can create the economies of scale and enhance the margins there. So there's a lot of opportunity in that space. We have driven a strategy of building the annuity revenue in that, and the annuity revenue in that business has been growing steadily in the last 3 years, and we will keep growing that. And those businesses have been very resilient, and Andy will unpack the resilience for you. Huge Software, and I'm just going to skip PanSmart for a moment. Huge Software is an accounting software business. It has a piece of software that is an equivalent to a Sage Evolution. And we bought that business 4 or 5 years ago to provide the back end to our operating companies. And we think that acquisition was critical, because if we are going to achieve what we want to achieve going forward with our businesses, we are going to have to bring a degree of automation, or a higher degree of automation and digitalization to our businesses, which means we are going to have to control the customer experience from order right through to accounting. And the best way to do that is to own all parts of that process. So we own our own accounting engine, we own our own billing engine, and we can integrate that, and we can bring automation to the table at a faster rate than one would ordinarily be able to do if one was using a Sage product or an Oracle product or a SAP product. There is, again, there is, again, a significant investment in that, and often our shareholders and prospective investors lose sight of that investment. We probably in this group spend 20 to 25 million rand a year on IT and on that process. And the returns on that investment take time to deliver, but you will start seeing those come through. So that was a very important acquisition for that reason, but minute in the bigger scheme of things. I think we paid 4 million to acquire that software. Then I touched on PanSmart. PanSmart is a PABX vendor. It's a box dropping business, certainly not seen as a very attractive business. We've seen the pressure that your typical computer suppliers have come under in the last 12 to 18 months. Those are typically cyclical businesses. PanSmart has suffered through COVID-19, but again, we bought it for strategic reasons. And just to give you an example of the strategic value of PanSmart, it supplies PABXs ordinarily in the market. Historically, it's done turnovers, it's grown those turnovers. The business is a new business, it has a 3-4 year life, and it's grown those turnovers to about 2.5 million rand a month. But here in the opportunity, huge Telecom every year pays about 40 million rand worth of commission to its resellers, and it pays that commission in the form of cash. What we are able to do now is we're able to substitute that cash with PABXs, and our very resellers in huge Telecom are PABX vendors. So we're now able to give them an enhanced value proposition, and at the same time reduce our cash outlay, and at the same time, based on huge Telecom's own spend on incentives, we could probably double PanSmart's revenue. Again, we're making acquisitions for strategic reasons, and sometimes what you will find is the fruits of those strategies and that execution take a bit of time to deliver. Andy, would you just give the audience a bit of a sense of where we sat with those companies on COVID-19?
Yeah, I think thanks, James. COVID gives us a nice hook to hang on the performance of the underlying opcos. I think the primary thing we need to talk about is when James and I look at the businesses and we want to invest or look at a new acquisition, we talk about the jockey or the team running the businesses. And I think it would be remiss of us not to talk and thank the teams that we have running our opcos at the moment and what they've done over the last 18 months since I've been part of it. We do have a fantastic group of companies underneath, and they're run by even better people, which is nice. The 2019-2020 year did see some changes and shifts in those people, and I think it goes to the depth of the management teams in those organizations. The latest announcement you would have seen, and starting at the top with huge Telecom, is Rob Berger took over as managing director this time last year, or slightly before that. We've just bulked up his team with Stephen Moroney coming on board. We have a strong, stable team in Telecom with a group of national managing executives who've been there for a long time. They've been there since James was driving and riding that horse. So I think we have stable management there. In Huge Connect, a big acquisition for the group when it happened, came with a very strong and long-running management team. We had the unfortunate incident of Andre Lessing, one of the founders and the CEO, having to take a step out of the business for health reasons. We put an interim control for a couple of months, but very clearly we had a very capable successor to Andre and Kevin, who was one of his original founding partners as well. So Kevin stepped into Connect. And in Connect, we have an incredibly mature management team. The team's been together for 10, 12 years and are founders of the business. And they've, through the previous comment where they've invested and locked down shares, they believe in the road we're taking. So nice to see from that point of view. Marius, who came out of Cynet and the ConnectNet deal and is now running our huge network business, has many years of experience in the networking ISP space. The Hotel team that come on board on that add more skill and value to it, so de-risk any one person risk we had there. So we sit with a very good team in that business. And Smart, as we said, small business, but the startup founding CEO, who was put in there by the original starters of the business, is in there, runs a lean team, and fully understands the market. Huge Software, as small as it was, we did do a restructure in that business, and the original founder, Malcolm, has stepped into the CEO role in the last number of months, and immediately you've seen the change and the passion by having someone whose heart's in the software, driving its capability and value through the group. And in my own mind, what I thought was a bit of an irritation has actually become quite a valuable part, and I think it's the basis of our automation and digitization, and our cross-selling opportunity now comes to how we control the back-end software across all the companies who are now running on our huge software platform as an accounting engine, and that engine runs what we have at head office. So all the accounting runs off a single platform. I think for the first time this year, our auditors were able to engage directly through our platform rather than ask for papers and documents. And I think that step into automation and digitalization is fantastic. So good teams, great to work with, hardworking, all committed to our cause. COVID raised a challenge that proved the value of annuity business. James spoke about the annuity in the businesses we have, and to go back to the example of huge Telecom, with a line fee business running at a 10 million rand annuity every year. What happened in the voice space when COVID-19 came along and we supplied small to medium to large enterprises, everybody was sent home. So what happened was the voice minutes that run off the platform, that is the cream James spoke about, declined by 75%. So voice minutes on the platform at huge Telecom and huge networks dropped off substantially. For a business that doesn't charge a line fee, that could have been very, very detrimental. A month of lockdown at 30–25% of your normal revenue on voice, you could run into an issue very soon. Our annuity revenue, being a monthly bill, allows us to float and manage our costs through that. The team at huge Telecom did a very good job of managing requests for reductions in their fee, because a lot of customers who panicked in the early stages of lockdown said, I want to cut all costs. The approach was, guys, do you really want to turn your telephone network off and then have to re-establish it once this opens up again? The line fee cost is minimal. The voice savings are absolute because you're not making calls. Maintain the cost in your business for as long as you possibly can. A few payment holidays were given to a few customers where they were given a month's leeway on their 200 rand line fee, but their contract was extended by a month. So all we had to do was manage a holiday period. When lockdown went from 5 to 4, voice traffic bounced back from 25% to 60%. This month we're running at close to 90–95%. And we believe now when the restaurants and the gyms come back, we'll be back to full volume of voice traffic. So very well managed, very few holidays, very little lost revenue. A key part of our small SME base, and when you read about decimation in the market and what's happening, was a concern of what would happen with the payments of our accounts once we move deeper into the COVID environment. The first month, April, we realized most people had 30 days worth of cash available in their businesses, and the debit order runs that ran and ran true to form. May, we thought, should also be okay. We saw a slight drop, but nothing that concerned us to any extent. Our concern was June, July, August. June came through with a better recovery rate and less returns than May, and July is looking solid. June is looking solid at the end, and we are seeing July and the usage, believing that the possible hole we would see in our debtors book has not materialized to this point. You would have all seen Telecom took a big provision, but they also stated they haven't seen the hole. We've been confident that our debtors will pay, and we're seeing that at the moment, and we're managing the cash very, very tightly, as you will be aware when it comes to our dividend discussions, because we are concerned that June, July, August could be the time that people get into trouble, and we don't want to be caught in that wave when it comes. We don't expect to at the moment based on what we've seen. Huge Connect, same situation. Huge Connect had a customer EdCon, so the biggest loss we had on it of customers was EdCon, and that wasn't due to any COVID, it was due to the business failure, the business rescue, and the now subsequent termination of that. So that was going to happen whether it was COVID or not. We had a large pushback from the banks to Connect saying you need to reduce your line fees. We went to the banks and said, guys, you've got all of your customers on the end of these lines. If you cut down the line, they're not going to be able to come back and trade. The banks accepted the arguments and the discussions, and between the team at Connect, Kevin and Dirk Maybe, who was customer facing at that stage, they provided and allowed for very few payment holidays and have secured very good revenue from the base. And I think by standing behind the value of the essential service we delivered, gained a lot of credibility with our providers out there, especially with the banks, who for the first time realized the value of the Connect function at the back end to their base. So Connect managed that really well. We've seen the bounce back but we don't see the bounce back in transactions at restaurants yet, so that's obviously missing. But we've seen the retail clicks come back. But as James also said, we charge a flat fee for the SIM card. We didn't use any revenue when the restaurant stopped swiping credit cards or the shop stopped swiping credit cards. So unlike Telecom, who lost their voice minutes, Connect didn't use any revenue because they're not in the transaction fee base of that. Huge Networks was interesting. It had its best month ever in April during lockdown because it got called on to deliver emergency enhanced data services and connectivity to one of the large hospital groups who needed a lot more capacity than they had. As an essential service business, which all three of the top entities on this slide were, we continued working through the lockdown phase 5, and Huge Networks delivered a rollout to a substantial hospital network and was able to bill at the end of the month and has now extended that into an annuity project that will deliver a large amount of revenue through this hospital group for the next number of years and well into the future. Demand at home and in gated communities went through the roof with Huge Networks, so they were able to deliver data and voice SIM cards over their network into gated communities around the country because everybody needed their connectivity at home now because they weren't at their office. So we benefited on that front. So what we lost on the Telecom and the Connect business side, we made up to some extent, although Networks is a much smaller business than the top two entities. To some extent, we recovered and grew our annuity base in the pot, which was very, very useful from that point of view. PanSmart, as James says, was a very clear indicator to us of why we don't want to be in a pure box dropping environment. James mentioned they do about R2.5 million worth of sales a month. In April, they did 187,000. Because there was nobody they could sell the PABX to, their channel was shut down and channel's partners or customers were shut down. So that market just died. Fortunately, it's a low-cost business with very few staff members. We were able to button it down for a month. People worked from home, continued trying to fill the pipeline. And come May, we started to see more sales orders. Once we went from 5 to 4 to 3, we were allowed to then deliver hardware equipment again. We had a very good month of sales in May, and it looks like now June will be back to normal. Everybody's trying to restock their pipeline. So a very clear picture of why we want annuity, and one of the reasons James alluded to on what we're trying to do with PanSmart and why we've moved in there is to create it as an annuity supplier, but through Huge Telecom. So that will build it from that point. Huge Software, as we said, delivers our back end to our own businesses, so we continue to pay them. Their customers will continue to pay, and we in fact grew their customer base of external customers to the platform. So we're seeing a lot of traction in Huge Software terms coming to that market. So I think we have a good opportunity from that point of view. So a resilient team worked really hard. Our impact on COVID, I think we had 5 or 6 positives that were then negatives. We had people who isolated. We had nobody who's got really sick. We've had everybody recover. All of the implementation of the requirements by the government were applied. We are still driving a work from home, if you can work from home philosophy across the group. And I think that's very, very important. So a lot of the businesses are now looking at how well their teams are working over the last 3 months and saying, do we really need as much office space as we have got? Can we look at long-term efficiencies out of business? Do we need our accountants to be sitting in an office when they've worked so well from home? Salespeople are always mobile. Where do they need to be? So the new normal will bring benefits of efficiency to this group as well, because we've been able to test the capacity to work from home. We have had fantastic response from every member across the group. We've kept in contact with them. Some of you might have seen the silly videos that James and Sam and I were putting out to try and keep motivation going. It really has helped, and the commitment from everybody is fantastic. So from an operating point of view, I think we sit with some very good assets who've proved even more resilient than we expected because they were tested by a real challenge, and that was COVID-19. And what the team did, rather than panic and run away, they stood up to what they needed to do. They changed their models and they delivered the service. And we are very proud that of those businesses, we were able to deliver the essential services throughout the entire lockdown period, continue to do so, while maintaining the income, the revenue, and the profitability of the business and the group. By putting the people first, we did lose a little bit at the bottom line, but we'll recover it, and we were able to come through stronger. So I think that gives you a reasonable view of where we are from a COVID and an underlying OpCo point of view.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. What I'd like to do, and again, it's often difficult to try and table the opportunity in various businesses in that whole 3-minute upper lift exercise to a 6-year-old, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Huge Telecom is a line rental business. Its average customer spend is about 2,500 rand, so it's got very low concentration risk. But the business model is a function of many factors, including your inward supply of service, and there you've got to have stable service from multiple suppliers at the right kind of cost. From an outbound perspective, you need to get the service to market. And so what that requires is a significant distribution channel. I mean, in Huge Telecom, they have 800 odd resellers that they have signed over the last 6, 7, 8 years. The other factor in the business that's very important is the cost of the infrastructure. So Huge Telecom is a very capital intensive business where the payback period on a telephone line is typically 17 to 19 months. So what you do is you put a lot of money into the ground. In our case, it's the air because we use a wireless GSM solution, but there's certainly hardware components, and then it takes time to get a return on that infrastructure. In that kind of business, if you keep growing, then you never catch up to a position where the business becomes a cash cow, because the growth continues to consume cash. Whereas in Huge Connect, that's a highly cash generative business where the infrastructure cost up front is very, very low and very minimal. So getting back to Huge Telecom for a moment, is if you can get the inward costs to the right kind of level, you can start playing different games in the market. So over the last 23 years, Huge Telecom has not played a pricing game. It's played a margin game, very, very high margins. Typically in that business, transmission margins are sitting in excess of 70%. And when we add the other factors, we can get margins as high as 85%. Huge Telecom carries no service layer cost because of how stable GSM really is. But if we can get the cost of a telephone line, and our cost of a telephone line in that business every time we install one is 5,000 rand. If we can get that cost down to 500 rand, then the delivery can take a completely different dimension, because you can start using price as a mechanism in the market. We haven't done that to date, and that is because twofold. One is it's capital intensive, so if you use price, margin declines, you do more sales, which are cash intensive and suck a lot of cash, and so your payback periods become longer and longer and longer. We have sorted out transmission costs in terms of that inward supply component. We've brought that considerably down over the last 6, 7 years, where we were buying a minute 6, 7 years ago at 1 rand. We're now buying a minute today at a fraction of that price. So we sorted out that element. In terms of customer acquisition costs, that took us a number of years to sort out. We had a direct sales force of 60 people 6, 7 years ago. We replaced that with an indirect channel. We have, through our resellers, probably 3,000 feet on the street in any given month, selling our connectivity alongside PABXs. And so we had to sort that element out. We've had to get the supplier element sorted out. That's a work in progress, but we've made significant progress on that front. Probably the last two areas that need some attention for that business really to take off is to work on the infrastructure cost of the telephone line, and that is get the router costs down. That really is a function of volume. So if you're buying 10,000 units a month of a router that supplies a voice telephony solution, you'll get your costs significantly down relative to purchase orders of 1,000 a month. So that's one element. The second element is bringing a significant level of automation to that business from the start of the service ordering process. And if we can get that right, we can cut further costs out in the business. And so that business is probably very near to having all its components in place to be able to deliver substantial growth. When we come to Huge Connect, there are various changes taking place in the market. Some are stimulated by market factors, others are stimulated, let's say, by accounting factors. And one particular one that's worth noting is that our engagement, that business's Huge Connect's engagement, our engagement with the banks is typically around the supplier of a SIM card to a bank, who then puts it into a mobile point of sale and then supplies that to its merchant, which it acquires. But what the banks have recently started talking to us about is whether they need to play in that mobile point of sale space, and whether there's not an opportunity to collaborate with us in the provision of the mobile point of sale. Now, that would be taking SIM card rental to mobile point of sale rental as an additional revenue stream in that business, still not in the transactional space, still in the rental high annuity space where gross margins are significant, but where we take, we have an offtake from the banks of a particular element of that vertical. And again, that might become a very significant opportunity going forward in the market for Huge Connect. So we're very excited about that business, and given its very high cash flow generation, it makes it a very important part of the combination that we have today. Because if you think about Huge Telecom and Huge Connect as the two big businesses in Huge Group, Huge Connect really funds Huge Telecom's growth trajectory and its capex investment. I mean, we're sitting with about a 250 million rand investment in Huge Telecom's capex, and that has been funded over time through internal cash flow generation, and Huge Connect is a significant contributor to that. Then in the case of Huge Networks, to give you a little bit of example of the scaling effects that can take place in that business, there are a lot of voice over IP data businesses in South Africa, and these businesses are suboptimal because of their size. And we'll give you one practical example without changing names. Huge Networks, our business, turns over, let's say, circa 90 million rand. It has gross profit of about 40 million rand. And by the time we get to the bottom line, we might make 10 million rand out of this business. So we get about a 10% yield pre-tax out of that turnover. Having said that, though, we've seen another business in the marketplace. It turns over 200 million, and it has a similar yield. But if we put those two businesses together, we can significantly enhance that yield because of the economies of scale that we can bring to the table. So instead of seeing Huge Networks as a 40 million rand gross profit business that generates 10 million rands worth of operating profit, it can be seen as a 40 million rand gross profit business, which then retains part of the overhead to retain that gross profit, and then say that number is 15 million rand, and is now transformed into a business that can deliver 25 million rands worth of operating profit contribution, which then if you put that with the 200 million rand business that has the same yield of 20 million, you've now got a 45 million rand contribution on a 300 million rand turnover. You've enhanced your profitability in that business, and we see significant opportunity in that space. Obviously, the question is going to come, well, how are you going to finance these kind of transactions? And we'll get into that in the slide or two that follow.
I think we've addressed Pansmart and we've software.
Correct.
Correct. We can do that. If there's any questions people can ask.
Just on the point of prospects of for raising capital, we do believe there are lots of opportunities to use our shares to acquire companies where there is ultimately a credit enhancement by taking unlisted paper and transferring that into listed paper. And again, with our vendors with whom we engage, understanding the liquidity risks in a share like Huge Group, but also understanding the value that the current share price presents. We have our own views internally as to what a Huge Group share is worth at a fundamental level. We think we can be convincing enough. We think we can be. We're in a position to demonstrate the underlying value of a Huge Group share to prospective vendors who will ultimately, at the end of the day, be prepared to accept a Huge Group share, which, yes, they understand is not a liquid share, but from a credit enhancement perspective, a much better proposition than having a minority stake in an unlisted private company. And we think we can do deals at that level, and we can do a number of deals at that level. And so we still believe that the Huge Group share presents currency. And so when there are discussions around delisting, we measure them against that. So what we will do is if we are going to issue shares, and given the liquidity risks in the listed space, and particularly with Huge Group, if we are going to issue shares, they will come with the requirement of a lock-in, and typically the lock-in period will be a minimum of 3 years. Our target lock-in period is about 5 years on any transaction that we're doing. We want to engage with vendors and businesses where we bring the jockeys on board and that they buy into the long-term strategy. As regards raising of cash, we understand, and we certainly we don't need to issue shares for cash to finance acquisitions, and we won't, given the yields on a Huge Group share, or the prospective yields on a Huge Group share. And so the ability to raise debt financing is now an important equation. And in that regard, our relationship with Future Growth is very good. We can, Andy and I can tell you that in the last 18 months, Future Growth have brought us a lot of opportunity and a lot of prospective investments to look at. We haven't found one that we quite like yet that they brought us. We see a lot that we like outside of what they bring to us, but it does go to Future Growth's trust in our ability, certainly to safeguard their investments in debt in our business. So while we have another 20 million rands worth of capacity in our 200 million rand facility, which is now being paid down to 133 million, which obviously when we draw down on the last 20 will go to 153. We bring that facility down over a 3 to 5 year period, so it keeps diminishing. But we have a relationship with a partner who's prepared to almost provide us with the same kind of monies on a revolving basis as and when we need them. And that's because of the track record we've established with them. So we think, given the right kind of acquisition, we have a partner in Future Growth to be able to fund this. In addition to that, we have good internal cash flow generation. We are doing a lot of things to improve the internal cash flow generation in Telecom. And so there'll be a cash enhancement there as well. And that just positions the group to be able to grow. So we don't plan, and we have no real need of issuing shares. I suppose the question that gets asked then is, given COVID-19 and given all the risks in the market, what is the likelihood of an issue of shares for cash or a rights offer? I mean, we wouldn't want to sit here and say there is zero chance of that happening, but it is highly, highly unlikely that we would need to come to the market for an issue of shares for cash. Or for that matter, a significantly discounted rights offer. So that's not going to happen. We're not going to need that. And if we did, then the repurchase program that we have out there would be antithetical. And if you could just go to the last, sorry, so I'll make sure I cover the last point. What we did want to cover just in summary then is the investment case. And what we'd like to leave you with is 3 takeaways. We've got a significant real estate to customers. There are 50,000 customers here, and we can leverage that customer base. And we've been having various conversations with various service providers of other products and services in the market who would like to get access to our real estate. The reality is we communicate with 50,000 customers every single month. We bill them every single month. And there's a value in that. If one has to weigh up the cost of acquisition of customers and the inability to interact and what that cost presents to anyone who wants to enter a market, when you weigh that all up, you realize the value of this real estate. We want to grow it, we want to leverage it, we know we can. Regarding track record, 10 years ago, Huge Group was a 30 million rand market cap. We have transformed it today. Yes, it stands at an illiquid position of a 800-900 million rand market cap. In a liquid market, it might be substantially greater than that. At the top end last year, at a reasonably traded level in 2019, we had a market cap of about $1.5 billion. We know we can grow the revenues with this business, with this group. We think we have put the track record, we have the track record, we've delivered in the past, and we can continue to deliver. If it was difficult 10 years ago to put the score on the board, it is substantially easier now, given the platform that we have laid. You know, to take a single operating company, listed company, and transform it into what we have today, that was where the real hard yards took place. From here, it is substantially easier. I mean, we've got good companies with good revenues, with good margins that are not X-growth. You cannot be generating plus 70% gross margins and be X-growth. This is a growth group. And with that as a platform, I mean, what we're really saying in conversation, you know, whether it's over a breakfast or a lunch or it's a beer, what we're saying to people is we've got the track record to do this at a significantly faster pace than what we have done historically. Our hands were constrained, or our hands were tied, and we did have constraints in 2017-18, trying to build a corporate capability. We now have that, and what we're saying is just give us a bit of time and we can deliver against the promises that we've made. So last point, or one of the last points, is just on dividends. We have taken a cautious view. We are not saying that there is no final dividend for the 2020 financial year. We are assessing COVID and the impact, as Andy has relayed to you. Certainly in the case of Huge Telecom, we're seeing no material impact on debit orders. As I've explained to you, customer spend there on average is 2,500 rand per customer, but we're not seeing drop-off rates in debit order collections, and it's mainly a debit order collection business. Likewise with Huge Connect, we're not seeing that cash flow impact. What we've got to weigh up is short-term opportunities on M&A, and we are seeing some short-term opportunities. They're nowhere at the level of transactional stage yet, but we've got to weigh that up in terms of need for cash, balanced again against what we can raise in terms of debt. So we're sitting with 40 million rand in cash. We continue to generate healthy levels of cash, and we've got to try and manage that carefully. What we can commit to is that if there is excess cash, we will declare dividends. And we have not made a final decision as yet on the 2020 dividend. Again, just in last summary, and I've touched on the specifics of the investment case, but just the 2 pointers. If you take where we paid dividends last year, the share price here, it certainly is a reasonable dividend yield if we continue to pay the kind of dividends we paid last year. We paid 18 cents a share last year, and if we continue to do that, that's reasonably attractive from an income yield perspective. From a capital appreciation perspective, we think there's substantial opportunity on a capital appreciation level. We don't think the market is rewarding us for our track record, for our investment case, but I mean, these things don't stay the same forever, and we do believe that will change, and we think we've got the right platform when it does change. And so there's got to be significant capital appreciation opportunity going forward. I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I think it sums it up. I think the key in this market, we've painted a picture of a reasonably unstressed group of companies. There are lots of companies experiencing stress, and that's an opportunity to buy, and that's possibly, well, it is one of the key reasons of the cautiousness around dividends. Because once you give the cash away, you're not going to get it back. We've got to make sure we don't miss opportunities here on acquisitions that will pay us good returns for the next 10 years because we needed something this year, but it's being weighed up on a daily basis depending on what we're doing. So it is being taken very, very seriously from where we are. If you don't mind, let me go across to some questions if we've got them. I think we answered some of the few in the beginning. We spoke about the ConnectNet Trust, so I'm just reading them off the screen. Looking for acquisitions. Peter, have we addressed the questions on there? What sectors are of interest to us? I think consolidation in the network connectivity space is important for us, where we know and understand the markets we're in. I think that's important for us to look at. We do still like the fintech space. James and I spent a vast amount of our time during lockdown on Zoom calls with potential targets. We're still engaging with a number of opportunities. So I think the fintech space is interesting. You have a lot of people playing in the space. Some have proven their worth and maybe way too expensive based on expectations, and some are still in test phase. And we would rather spend on a brownfield opportunity than a greenfield risk. And that's the state of management stance we're taking, is looking at things a little more cautiously.
I think on the next question in terms of ROIs, ROEs, I mean, we're very cognizant that we're sitting with an ROE of in the region of about 11, 12%. I mean, that's a function of purchasing goodwill, because it's ballooned ultimately the equity position, and so the returns relative to that bigger equity position are difficult equations for us. And so what we've got to do is, certainly on our existing businesses, is create that organic growth. But we do believe our current operating businesses can deliver that organic growth. And what we're seeing now in the market is we're seeing opportunities for acquisitive growth that will not come with, and hopefully not come with, significant goodwill price tags attached to it.
I think there's a question on the expected payment defaults and what are we doing across the business to protect the businesses and the shareholder value. I think we've turned the phrase in the group since COVID started that every rand is a prisoner. The financial directors under Sam's control are running daily cash flows. We're making sure what money we do have and is coming in is being managed. So ensuring we don't go into bad business for a desperate need, someone that might default on us a little bit later. But the current customer base, based on the average spend per customer, we're not a high ticket item across a customer's spend, but we are an essential service. If a customer's business is in trouble, the last thing they're going to turn off is their telephone or their credit card machine, because they cannot transact if they move into that space. So we are relatively protected because of the services we deliver, but what we can do and make sure we have to do is preserve every cent of cash that does come in, and anything that looks like it might be stretching and becoming a little risky, we are addressing and applying the pressure. So the financial teams are fully aware of it, and the guys on the debtor side are managing it. We are squeezing our own creditors, because why not take advantage of the benefits we can get from our big providers? An example to talk about is Connect approached both Vodacom and MTN on some assistance, and we were fortunate enough, they worked hard for it, we did get assistance. So what we've managed to gain far outstrips what we've lost at the moment, and we'll make sure we manage those. So I think from a cost point of view, James, Sam, anything?
No, nothing else on that. On the annuity revenue side, we need to break that up for you. Our businesses, their revenue comprises what we call a fixed annuity stream, and then a variable annuity stream. A fixed annuity stream happens every single month, and it doesn't change. And it's only dependent on the number of customers or the units of service that they take. So in the case of Huge Telecom, we have 43,000 telephone lines, all generating a line rental that's fixed in nature. Having said that, though, every single month in huge telecom, it builds customers for usage. And there's a sustainable pattern of usage, which makes it variable in nature, but also annuity. Huge telecom is a 99% fixed and variable annuity business. In huge connected is exactly the same thing as probably 100%. In the case of huge networks, you're closer to that, but 70% annuity based. Our small little business, huge software, is through its license fees and 100% annuity based business. The only business that we have in the group that is not annuity based is PanSmart, but we intend transforming that by making huge telecom a big customer to PanSmart, and therefore creating the annuity nature of its revenue stream. So it'd probably be fair to say 90 to 95% of the revenue is annuity based, but made up of components that are fixed and variable.
We have a question on key clients lost over the past 4 months. I think in what is necessary to understand in the big engines we have is we do have a churn that happens every month, whether it's a COVID impact. Customers move onto our network and customers move off. So what we look at driving is net growth across each customer base. We've been stable through the 4-month period, but have we lost customers? Yes. The largest customer we lost in the group was Edcon, and I did address that a little bit earlier. When they went into business rescue, we've lost Edcon South Africa. We haven't lost the Edcons that lie outside the country because they went back to a different payment platform, and now with their shutdown, that business is not coming back to us. That was substantial, but its total monthly annuity revenue that we got for it is less than the new annuity we bring on each month through the normal sales channel in Connect. So while we forego that opportunity, its revenue has been replaced the next month, but annuity is a nice thing about building on top. When you lose something, you've got to rebuild it. So we will catch that up over time, and the team are hard at work. I think the number of interactions on customers in the Connect business is actually showing a higher closing rate over the last 2 months than on the months prior to COVID. So we are seeing very good traction. I think focus on salespeople is testament to what they're doing in that space. So very, very useful from that point of view.
Shall I take the next one?
Yeah, I think we can talk about this.
One of the questions that has been posed is that most of South Africa Incorporated have been taking salary cuts to obviously protect businesses, and then obviously show some kind of solidarity with shareholders. The position that we've taken is at Huge Group is to protect salaries as much as we can, balanced against the returns of shareholders. So if we felt that our businesses were coming under significant pressure that would impact shareholders, and that there needed to be some kind of sharing of that impact by the employee base, we would have started at the top in the organization, i.e. from the executive team at Group, and we would have fed that into the organization with the objective of trying to limit as far as possible any impact on the lower paid employees in our company. We have been very fortunate. We have not had to cut anyone's salary in the group. And again, we've been in that position because our businesses have all been very resilient. Across the business, we have felt that at a group level where PanSmart has suffered significantly, we haven't been forced into a position where we would take salary cuts there, because we've been able to compensate with the other companies in our group. What Andy and I have done as part of the executive team is we have certainly tried to indicate that we understand where we sit in the market, and that these are very challenging times. And from that perspective, while we passed increases in March to our entire staff base, Andy and I have foregone any salary increases for the 2021 financial year as some kind of demonstration of our understanding of where we see the challenges in South Africa.
I think the motivational upside and the value you get out of getting your team and your staff across the board driven, saying if we keep our level of sales and our service where we need it to be, the last thing we're going to do is cut your salary, has had a huge impact on the group and the positiveness that we've seen coming through the 400 odd employees we have across the group. They were well aware, and there have been discussions that if it did get tough, and it may still get tough, we can never say never, but then what James said is correct, we'll start at the top and not impact anyone down at the bottom, because we understand the pressure. Because our customer base is SME, we see what is happening in South Africa in real time, and we engage with those, as James says, every month. We know what the pressure is down there, so we're not fooling ourselves that it's going to be rosy going forward, but we'll watch everything as we move.
If I can just add to what Andy has said there in terms of our people, I mean, all our businesses are services businesses. I mean, we are not a goods business, or we don't have businesses that are goods businesses. We have businesses that are services businesses, and they're dependent on their people. And, you know, I think it's an age-old saying out there, the last people you shouldn't be paying is your staff. So we have tried as best we can, and we've been in the fortunate position where we haven't had to actually even go anywhere near there. There's a question, are there any acquisitions under consideration at the moment? There are a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, there are lots of opportunities, but we're not in the business of buying businesses for buying's sake. It's got to be strategic for us, and I know that might sound rather cliche, but really we're not interested in buying businesses that don't come with great jockeys. And so in our engagement on all these opportunities, we want to buy at the right price for the right kind of people. And again, the right kind of people with whom we can have fun, that have a longer term time horizon, are not in or out on a very short term time horizon. So those are factors that we're considering, but there are lots and lots and lots of opportunities around. In terms of your share buyback target, what percentage have you reached? We've got a particular program in place on the buyback. The actual details have not been communicated to the market. Our reporting obligations are directed ultimately by JSE requirements. Any other communication then needs to go to the broader market, so it's very difficult to talk to a particular audience on what percentage. JSE regulations do require that once you hit a 3% level, you're required to report back. What is the approximate cash cost of monthly operational overheads given the centralized group function, and what percentage of these is funded from huge Telecom and huge Connect monthly revenues? The holding company structure stands alone, well, with no revenues. We could have adopted an approach that said we would charge management fees. We haven't. We have provided our shareholders and prospective investors with a very transparent position, and so we are always called to account on what we're spending in the group, and we spend it without any revenue contribution. So we as an executive team live in a world where we've got to justify our existence every month, every 6 months, every year. And what we're asking you to do is to give us a bit of time to make the capacity work for you. But it comes at a direct cost with no revenue behind it. Naturally, we are using the EBITDA generation of our operating companies and their cash to be able to fund our cash costs. I mean, we can't do it on our own. So we have no internally corporate office cash flow generation. We make money either through our deals or the sale of our operating companies. What is the company's gearing position? We're running very low gearing at the moment. I mean, our EBITDA generation in this last financial year on Sam's numbers is, I think you said 178 million. And our debt is currently sitting at 133. Future growth will allow us to go to 2.5 times EBITDA. So it means we've got capacity up to probably about 500 million rands worth of debt. But again, you start, they're diminishing returns of taking on additional debt, and we're very comfortable with where we are, and we would only be taking on debt to finance acquisitive growth. We've got no need to do so at an organic level to grow these businesses. If that does change, we will communicate to the market where we think that to organically grow a business, we need to take on debt. Is it possible to get into the online businesses like Takealot, or do they have their own capacity? Our businesses certainly have the ability, and probably, let me finish the sentence. Our businesses certainly have the ability to automate more through their processes. So from initial order right through to installation and money collection, we can automate more, and we will do so. And COVID-19 has certainly brought that to the fore, and we will work on that. As an example, probably one of the best examples of online businesses in our particular space is AfriHost. And AfriHost is the business that we understand turns over probably in the order of 800 million to 1 billion rand a year, and it has 35 odd staff. It's not impossible to achieve those kind of automation milestones with all of our businesses. Actually, let me rephrase that. Certainly of Huge Connect and Huge Telecom. I think in Huge Networks, it's a far more people bespoke kind of environment where you need the expertise of people, and so your ability to automate is limited there. But in Telecom, we should be able to automate significantly and certainly connect.
I think just to talk to the Takealot example, it's whether we can turn our businesses into an online platform or whether we can deliver services to those platforms. I think we have ConnectNet people knocking on the doors there to see if we can use any transactional, add their voice requirements and data requirements. They do go to the market. It's a customer that needs capacity, and we're a provider of capacity and connectivity. So the online vehicles are opportunities for us to expand. If we got to build one of their networks or expand their connectivity, we could do that, as we did with the hospital group we were talking about that got online. We need to know what they're doing. There's a second question on that, which talks about the emerging trend in South Africa or the world of working from home. I think we are in a very new environment, and we've had a discussion at the head office about office capacity versus home capacity and across all groups and businesses. Yes, definitely we are looking at the opportunity at the home product at Huge Telecom. We run a SOHO device, which is for a small office, home office, which did move during the COVID phase. It's take a phone, take it home, turn it on, and it works. You have connectivity. Huge Networks deliver voice over LT in fixed and mobile formats, so those were delivered into a number of the large gated communities and people move to home. And we roll out services over fibre. We roll fibre out into some gated communities, so that's into homes. And across the rest of the group, anybody who works from home can get the same sort of services, and the Huge Telecom product is a great product for that because it's very easy to install. There's no complex installation. I installed a Huge Telecom phone in my home for that exact reason, and it was delivered in a box. You turn it on and you connect, so it's a plug, play, walk away. We are looking at it, and we are tweaking models, connect to looking at an opportunity at the work from home connectivity as well. So yes, we are taking advantage. We are looking at it. Whether we're taking advantage of it yet, I think we're in an environment where a lot of people are looking, but we have the skill set to build a product that would work. Right, I think we are at the end of our questions. Let me just check what we have in the chat box. I'm driving. Can you talk in broad terms on how you've traded through the lockdown?
I think we've covered that.
We've done that.
And balance sheet strength.
Yeah, as a group strategy, how much huge growth do you expect to come from organic growth via acquisition?
I would, in terms of that balance, I think that's time dependent. You know, right now, where we sit today, it is all organic growth, but that could change in 6 weeks, where we bring a component of acquisitive growth onto the table. We are here to build the ROE in the businesses that we have. There are lots of opportunities, and one would be silly if one's not looking at them. But our primary objective is not to grow by acquisition. Our primary objective is to grow organically, and to enhance that organic growth through strategic acquisitions.
I think that's key. The underlying operations we have all have plenty of headroom. I think we've looked at them over the last 18 months. The teams have looked at what they can do, and The budgets and the stretch targets we've put them to are for them to grow, while we spend time looking at what the acquisitions come in, either to bolt onto them or to add at the top to put a decent leg underneath us or another leg underneath us. But James is right. If we bought the big acquisition, then our growth would be from the acquisition. If we don't, then our growth is going to be from OpCo. Fortunately, we think we can do both with the structures we have.
I think we've covered all the questions.
Yep, we are through the questions. There's been no more added. They've all been answered. All right, I think it's ended up.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. On behalf of Andy and Sam, we hope to have in-person conversations with you, and please drop us an email once we get out of the lockdown and we can go to a restaurant and have a breakfast or a lunch or have a beer with you. We'd love to do so. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I hope it was as well. It was a good new experience from us. Looks like we're just talking to James and Sam. We're all on the other side, but thanks for joining us, and we're pleased we got it done in the 2 hours we had set aside. Thanks very much.